Hey guys, and welcome to part 2 of the ABCs of building. I've decided to turn this into a 5 to 6 part series. Someone is fertilizing their farm right next to my house, and it doesn't smell too good. I don't like the smell, so if I ever sound disgusted in the video, that's why. Cow smells. It's not good. So, we're going to be talking about nature today. First part I want to talk about is what I call greenspotting, which is really just finding spaces around your park where you can fit in nature. Doesn't even need to be green nature. We have plenty of, gray blocks, brown blocks. Seems like gray, brown, and green are like the only three colors, but generally, greenspotting isn't just for green things. Now, a mistake I see in a lot of parks are people wanting to place down a forest and deciding to just go into their nature tab and pressing some tree and just willy-nilly placing it around. Put some rocks in there, bushes, and bam, they call this a forest. Now, if you do this a lot, technically, yes, you could call this a forest, but when it comes down to it, it's just trees and rocks. Nobody's gonna go through it and really feel anything. They won't know where to look. So instead, we're going to try to find ways to guide people's eyes around the nature. I think there are 3 basic rules you need to think of while placing each block. Now, I know that's a lot to think about. 3 rules, 3 whole rules every time I place something. That's too much. But really, over time, you'll start to get used to it, and you'll just unconsciously know to do these 3 things. Really, the thing with nature, more than any of the other skills, is that it comes with a lot of practice. A lot of practice. But after, a week at it, soon you'll be making entire lagunas and forests in seconds. So the 3 rules that you need to think of are rotation, height dynamic, which is really just, let me turn on collisions, making sure each object is a slightly different height from each other, and it lets you have it gives you more blocks than what you have, if that makes sense. Say you place this down and you place another one down, but you're changing the height. This looks like one large bush. It looks like all one model instead of just having 2 different bushes around here. You can really tell that these are 2 different models. But here, this could be one like tree for all anybody knows. And the next part is the spreading of each natural park, which is really important to think about, because you don't want to just put as many different things as you can in one spot. You see, here I'm just overloading, putting as much here as I can, just making sure to completely stuff up the space. And in some cases, this could look fine. Like, so far, this isn't looking too bad. I guess I gotta really up my game here. Really put some contrast. Oh, now that just looks ridiculous. See? I just keep putting things inside of each other. Creates way too much. Those are barrels. That's not even nature. But in general, putting too much stuff in one spot will really confuse someone looking at it. So I've built this simple house here, and we're going to try to decorate it using those 3 rules. So let's start with a bush. Maybe put it in this corner a bit. Rotate it, put it down a bit. Another bush, rotate it, put it down a bit. And I think this is missing a little bit of gray, which is really something you'll get after like a month or so of detailing, as you'll start to notice what colors and such are missing. And this spot is pretty good. I feel like it tells its own story. It gives its own feeling. So we move on to the next part, which will have a different combination of natural elements. So here we have a couple rocks, maybe even a, where's the tree stump? Tree stump. The tree stump is quite a nice model. I'd like to see it used more. Wow, can I really not spell? No, I spelled it correctly. Strange. Ooh, maybe we can do the one with an axe. Now that is some storytelling right there. It's beautiful. Now, another part of the spacing is what I like to call transitioning. So, these parts right here don't look bad, but they do kind of feel sudden. So what I like to do is put these more blocky bushes here, and you'll see it transitions better from the round to the square to the completely flat. And I like to do this with two specific blocks, the bush model and this rock model. You can see it really helps to bring your eye from the round rocks to the, oh, I can't find this model, flat ground. You see it slowly moves down. The next thing I'd like to talk about is height dynamics, which I already talked about the difference in putting it slightly more on the ground than the other, so you can like see a clear difference. That's a bit too far. Let's give it some bushes here. But you also want to have differences in the space given here. So here we have lower space, here we have higher space, and here we have the, well, highest space, really. The building should usually have the air space by the top of the build that you have. So just moving around. We can even have some like ivy, we might call it, on the wall here. Now, I wouldn't do this for too many buildings unless you have a very specific theme. Like here, it's a bit random that we just have some bushes coming out of the wall. But if you have a greenhouse or just a what do you call it, an abandoned house maybe, I've seen a couple builds of abandoned cities that really make good use of the ivy and the bushes, showing it being a little overgrown. Of course, the placement of the ivy is quite important, so let me try to get this right first try. Well, I guess this is my fifth try. We have some nice ivy. Really adds to this wall, because this wall was painfully blank before I placed those there. So this is general green spotting. Of course, I could go all the way around the building, but that would be boring. I just want to show you the main points here. Now, I want to talk about some creative uses that I've seen out there. There are plenty of green parks out there, forests, jungles, we'll call it, just because the ground here is green. So of course people are just gonna, as their first park, assume, oh, well, I should build a forest here because it's green. But if you were to make, say, a desert park, which I'd like to see a lot more, really, then here are some tips to make a very detailed ground. So here I'll start making a dune. Now for the dunes, I don't even use the rocks. Everybody knows the rock system, where you place all the primitive blocks or even just a rock model to make a very bumpy ground. But for dunes, especially when you have disabled collisions, it's really just easier to use the terrain tool to make yourself a little slope here. Now, there are quite a few different things I'm focusing on while making this dune. First off, it is making sure that each block has a... Here, I'll show you in a little rock area here. When you make... I'm just putting grass on grass. When you make terrain, there's 3 different types. I know it looks like a lot more, but really there's only 3 different types. 1 point, 2 points, which has different sizes and it creates this crease, and highest, second highest, oh wait no, highest, second highest, third highest, 3 points, which makes 2 creases. Now you combine those a lot and you'll start to create this, really it looks like a kind of modern art piece when you really think about it here. And you just want to make sure that you make great use of those creases by using different heights for each of the various... Oh, here's another part. This flat surface is not very appealing. So you want to make sure to cover it up, not completely, but slightly cover it up with the next piece closest to it. Now this slope is a bit flat for my taste. I like my dunes a little more jagged, but there is a reason to have more sloped terrain. Now, a very creative use I see in the desert would be palm trees. And of course you could just place a palm tree right there and be done with it. But something that I've seen that I really like so far is making these custom palm trees using 2 different trees. So let's find a whole cylinder. Just this guy. Yeah, that's a good size. And we build it up slightly. Let's give myself... we have all the snapping we need. Give it a slight bend because it's a palm tree. It's got to bend a bit. I might have been a bit much, but then we put the palm tree in, and we'll just have the prawns, sorry, on a palm tree. The leaves are called fronds, so we'll have the fronds showing. Man, the bend on the palm tree usually looks really nice, but when you're trying to put it inside a cylinder, it's really difficult. And if you know, palm trees have these parts under them. I think it's where they store the seeds. I'm not sure. But, I feel like I made this too small. But if you take this and make it a little brown everywhere, you can create the underside seed area. Now, really, I think to make larger fronds, you would have to do that custom as well. But since we have the desert theme, maybe in Australian outback, you can add these to create a kind of dried grass look. Let's put one in the crevice right here. So we have this dried grass. Maybe we can add some of the dead trees in, and here you really just have a nice little Australian outback area. Now with terrain, I have a very specific style that I like to use when creating height dynamic, because throughout your park you really want it to move up and down in waves, even the pathway, which I'll cover in the I believe the 3rd, so next episode in this series. But say you have a terrain that goes up and you have some pathway that goes along with it. Let's find here we go, nice ramp. Maybe fix up the textures. Oh, there we go, that's much nicer. That was a very intense outline. So, we go up here, but we have this edge here, just flat edge. So what I like to do, and you can use this style anywhere. You don't just need it for the edges. Is I take these trees and I just shove them straight in the ground. And if done correctly, you will have what used to be a flat surface become a rounded, organic kind of edge. Now, of course, you don't just need to use trees. A rock that I like to really use is this tall, almost skinny rock. But of course, like I said with spacing, it would look quite ugly if you just kept placing this one rock, unless you're using a very quarry-like stone theme. Of course, I guess here I didn't do it enough for it to look too bad, but really, if you start just placing all these rocks here, especially if it's a more foresty theme, it starts to get old, really. This cobbled mess here only works with some very specific themes. So I like to have just a tree every so often. Make sure to use different trees, or else people will be able to tell if you use the same tree model. It won't be like they're looking for it, but they'll subconsciously start to realize, hey, those are all turned the same way. I think to show that example, I'll place a couple bushes all in the I can change the size, but you know, even just subconsciously, you start to notice things that are the same. Especially this diamond piece and this lighter piece. Start to realize, you start to notice it copy over, and people will notice this. That's why I really push making sure you rotate every time you place, especially when they're close to each other. So as long as you remember those 3 rules of rotating, height dynamic, and spacing, and you practice for, give it a month's time, you'll really just start being able to make these huge naturalistic mountain ranges. So I think next I'm going to talk about what was heavily requested, and that is how I like to make mountains. So I usually like to start by just making a general shape using the terrain. Now I see a lot of people making sure to like slope the edges. Personally, I think that uses up more time than it's worth. I like to just use these flat edges because I'm going to cover it all up with rocks anyway. So why would it matter to me if they're sloped or not? People won't be able to see it. When building mountains, I would really try to use groups of 2 to 3 once you start getting higher. Because this part looks really messy and really draws your eye more than this kind of peaceful slope does. That's something I learned from Minecraft building. You know, anybody out there that plays Minecraft will know that when doing terrain with the blocks, you really want to make, you'd go by 4, then you'd go by 3, then you'd go by 4, especially when making a curved piece of land. So here we have this general mountain. Let me go all the way to the bottom just to show how I would then transition to the floor. So we go up, doing it by the groups. Let me fix this part up a bit. Okay, something like that. Really changing where the groups are to give it some interest. And I'm stuck in the rock. Hold on. There we go. Bam, bam, bam. Now, while the terrain tool only gives you, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 colors. Once you're able to use the blocks, you can make it whatever color you want. Say you want to do some beautiful alpine mountains. Well, when we place the blocks, we should, instead of having it as this dark gray, we'll make it this light gray. Because I see a lot of parks that use the exact same color for every rocky surface in their park, and it starts to get boring. People want to be won over by the difference in your park. When they walk by and they see a rocky gray mountain, dark gray, it'll probably be a good mountain, and they'll notice that, but they won't see it and think, oh, this is new, this is not something I haven't seen before, I want to go check that out. So it's really important to, if anything, we can make this a reddish mesa mountain. You know, say this is more clay than anything. Now, another thing I want to say is the movement of the rocks. See, I'm not just placing them. Sorry, I am placing them just kind of flat, you know, changing the scale of it a little bit, because that's important to give it that rocky look. But there are so many different ways that you can personalize your mountain, because a lot of people just use this kind of flat style, but I've started to take in more lifting it slightly, and every time you rotate it, see how it gives it a weird rotation, like something that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise, because you're stacking the rotations on each other. See, you have this, you just have a flat rock, you turn it up, you turn it to the side, even if you turn it back down, now it's at a completely different angle. See that little set right there? So you start doing that, and the mountain will have these rocks that are probably the only rocks in the world that are at that specific rotation, because there's just so many different decimal points that you could have your rock at, that if you stack these rotations on each other, it'll find whole new ones. So here I have all the rocks supposedly kind of in an upward direction, but you don't just need to have them in an upward direction. You could also have them at a side. Instead of the front, it's the side, and this will give it a kind of curved feeling that I really like to use for my jungle parks. So, because jungles have these rounded, I forget the name of the type of mountain, but in jungles they have these long curved cliff walls from years of erosion, which I feel like turning and rotating your rocks really give the illusion of erosion over years, instead of just, you know, stacking blocks like Jenga. No, you're making thousands of centuries of erosion just by clicking your mouse. Now I really like to give it some, you know, personalized little sections of detail. Like here, I kind of went out in a curve here, and then went in here, and it'll create this little platform. Because you see those in nature, you see those little platforms. Another thing is, you'll see this a lot, where the rocks just kind of poke out, which, especially when you have this kind of different color rock, you really don't like. And for that, you just use the remove air tool and get rid of them, and then you gotta fill in the holes with whatever block you need to, and that fixes that issue. is so satisfying to see an entire mountain finished. Look at this. It's beautiful. Now, the momentum of building is really what takes you through this. I've had countless experiences where I've had to build an entire mountain from nothing but those rock sticks, I guess you'd call them. And you look at it and you're thinking, oh boy, I'm never gonna finish this entire mountain. This is impossible. But then you start, you get into a flow, the momentum starts picking up. You can see in the time lapse, I kind of started getting faster and faster with my actual flow. And you just, suddenly you have an entire mountain in an hour. It really takes less time than you think it will. It'll feel better than you think it will. And it just happens. The flow hits you. Now, if you saw, you might not have seen because it went too fast, but I made a couple mistakes in the video. Like this block right here. This isn't going with the general flow of the other rocks. And I kept it in on purpose because it's natural. It's the most organic block in this entire mountain because it was a mistake. So if you're making a lot of mistakes, the best thing really is to go with them. They're probably, you're probably lucky to be having them, honestly. The mistakes really add to it. So don't delete all your mistakes, just keep them in and see how it looks from the outside. Now I think the final thing I want to talk about is a mix of the Greenspotting and the next episode, which is going to be on paths and placement. Now, with a path here, a problem I hear a lot from other players is that it just looks too flat and boring. Now, personally, what I do for this is what I call path guard. I'm going to make a disabled collision version first, just to show you that you don't need to have the game passes to create something like this. Of course, it would help to have them and make it a more streamlined experience and could come out much better. Oh, that's disabled. Well, you get the idea, of course, that the general look comes from just having nature in the middle of this rocky or whatever path you have. Let's see, what's something you could put in there? Ooh, these always work amazingly for good little flower pots. If you just stick in the underside, you got a nice little flower pot. Something more is you can use an entire flower bed like this to create, just shoving it in the ground to create what looks like flowers on the ground. And it's a trick I've had to use for a while now. Let's change the color here. And really, that's all you need to know to start your adventure on practicing nature. Thank you for joining me in another video. The next one should be out, I believe, tomorrow. And I hope you guys all have a good day. Yeah, I don't know. I was just walking around my flat world and it was just like a grass block here. Just above. You know? I didn't put this here. Who the hell put this here?